Have you ever found yourself replaying a conversation in your head for hours because someone said something that got under your skin? Do certain people consistently irritate you because they do the same things that push your buttons? Do you ever gossip, complain, or talk shit about people as a way to vent judgment and irritation, hoping to get someone to agree with you and sympathize? What if the things and people that annoy you most aren't obstacles to your peace, but gateways to it? Annoyance is one of the most universal human experiences. It arises in various forms and has infiltrated culture because it is so normalized. But annoyance is largely misunderstood. And instead of being frustrated, I propose being grateful for what annoys you, because annoyance actually disguises many other emotions and aspects of yourself that want to be seen and loved and healed. We're conditioned to either suppress annoyance and be the bigger person, or to displace it through venting, complaining, blaming. But we're rarely taught to see those moments as intelligent guidance. But the truth is, every irritation, every frustration, and every emotional charge is never random. Every instance of activation, is what that is actually your subconscious and your highest self handing you like a literal compass and saying, hey, look here. This is where you are not yet free, not yet integrated, and where you still need to love yourself more. Because annoyance and activations are very rarely about the situation or the other person that is annoying you. They're more often than not about us, where we are still holding judgments, where we have unresolved wounds and pains and traumas, and where we have yet to forgive ourselves or our past or other people. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about how to perceive and respond to annoyance in a healing manner, as opposed to the normalized conditioned reaction that keeps people stuck in the same loops and cycles. Because your activations are not a bad thing, friend. Each and every single one of them, no matter how big or how small, is a precise healing opportunity and a precise map to what needs healing. Welcome to The Simple Source, a paradigm-shifting space where self-love, healing, spirituality, and personal growth are redefined. If you've been told healing takes years, that abundance must be attracted, or that transformation requires struggle, you haven't been told the truth. I'm Linda Valines, a certified trauma-informed holistic coach, author, and spiritual guide. After healing myself from chronic conditions, complex trauma, and lack, not by following traditional frameworks, but by creating my own, I'm now teaching you to love, heal, and free yourself, mind, body, and soul, so you can reclaim your highest health, happiness, and potential with joy and ease. Each week, we go beyond surface-level self-help and into the real mechanics of transformation. If the traditional paths to healing and spirituality haven't produced the changes you want in the life you desire, you're in the right place. You were never meant to struggle or wait for what is already yours. Let's get started with today's episode. Most people, when they get annoyed or irritated, they judge and they blame the other person or the situation, and or they gossip, they complain, or just vent about what happened to try to feel validated. Or they suppress that irritation to stay quote unquote high vibe, or to keep the peace, hoping that an irritation, annoyance is just going to go away. Now, while those quote unquote strategies are common reactions to annoyance, they don't facilitate any real resolution because the underlying activation is not acknowledged. The emotional charge remains in your body and your nervous system remains then dysregulated. And so that annoyance is just gonna surface again when another similar situation presents itself. Most people spend their day in some level some degree of ongoing like irritation or annoyance, whether that's at the news, something they saw on social media, something their friends did, their partner, a family member, a coworker, a stranger they encounter during the day, or just some repetitive, unsatisfying situation in their life. But those annoyances, they're not punishment for like being a bad person or unworthy or unhealed or whatever. And they're not proof that the world is full of irritating people or that people just suck. They're actually precise and very intelligent signals from your nervous system, from your subconscious, and yes, from your highest self, literally directing you to the exact places where you are not yet free. And so annoyance is like one of the most undervalued healing and spiritual teachers we have. But when you understand what an activation is and why they surface, meaning why you get annoyed, why you get irritated, then you can stop moving through your day just like constantly on edge or constantly complaining or just sort of like ready to blow up, and just begin to start freeing up precious energy to heal more productively and live more freely and peacefully and joyfully, because you will be resolving old wounds and dismantling outdated conditioning and liberating stuck emotional energy. So in this episode, we're going to explore why annoyance is sacred guidance, how it actually accelerates your healing, and why gratitude and not blame is the most powerful and healing response you can have. Because once you learn to treat activations as invitations rather than irritations, you stop being at the mercy of the external world. You then reclaim your power, your sovereignty, and your inner peace. So I'm doing this episode because I'm just going to be frank and honest. I'm really tired of listening to certain people in my friend group complain. I made a vow to stop complaining years ago because it's just not useful energy. And we're going to talk about why throughout this episode. But because I've made that vow to myself, I guess I'm just like hyper aware of when other people complain, because I intentionally do not complain. And so there are just some friends that I've had for decades, and they're lovely and they're loyal souls, but they haven't invested in their own growth or healing. And as I become more and more coherent, and now I'm like so coherent and so attuned to my own activations, that I really have like very little tolerance for when people talk shit about other people with zero self-awareness and zero self-reflection. I don't have a tolerance for it, because I don't want to talk about how annoying it is when someone didn't thank you for holding the door open for you at like the restaurant, or like how rude people are when they're at the grocery store. Like, those are not engaging topics of conversation for me. And I do understand that people want their experiences to be validated, but as an adult, it is your responsibility to validate your experiences and your emotions, not my responsibility to agree with you when your life gets annoying. And as an adult, there are so many other things that I would rather talk about than how this person or that person is annoying. I don't entertain those types of conversations at this point in my life, because again, they're not engaging. They're not enjoyable. They don't serve my highest self. They don't serve my highest timeline. And there's just like a whole culture of shit talking and complaining that's just so boring and tiresome for me. Like, I'm just like, look in the mirror, friend. What bothers you about other people is the stuff that you are unwilling to see and love about yourself. And that is what is interesting to me. I want to talk about that. When people are curious about their own experiences in a way that begets personal empowerment, awakening, and healing, rather than just feeding blame and persecution. So if you are like, ooh, I kind of like relate to that, or you have friends that like to point out how this person or that person is rude, or they're just like quick to point out other people's shortcomings, or they tend to complain about humanity without actually working on themselves, you feel me. And I hope you share this episode. Because if more people stopped talking shit about how they're annoyed about this and that, and they just started investing in healing themselves, then our society and culture would stop becoming a daily dumpster fire and would start becoming a source of inspiration and encouragement and revelation. So now let's start by getting really clear on what's actually happening in the moment when you feel annoyed and activated or emotionally charged. So most people think of annoyance as a reaction to something external, right? Someone cuts you off in traffic, someone interrupts you, someone speaks with a tone that grates on you, someone ignores your message, someone doesn't email you back, whatever. And then automatically you feel that familiar tightening in your chest, that fluttering of your heart. You may get hot, that urge to judge and lash out or shut down and complain is what most people experience. But underneath that surface reaction, something far more intelligent and wise is taking place. So from a neuroscience perspective, an activation is simply a stress response. So your nervous system is wired for survival. That's its primary goal and intention. And so it's constantly scanning for cues of safety or cues of danger, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, socially, like all the time. Your nervous system is like, are we safe? Are we safe? Are we at a threat? Or are we in danger? So when something happens that threatens your identity, like when you feel like someone doesn't understand you, or B, your sense of belonging, like, oh, I feel excluded, or C, your sense of safety, like, oh, I don't feel respected and loved here, then your brain interprets all of that as a form of a threat. And most people still don't understand that your stress response is highly attuned to every single moment of your life. And it's super, super sensitive. And so you don't need a literal tiger chasing you down the street for your limbic system to feel a sense of danger. A cutting remark from a coworker is going to light up that same neural alarm and activate that stress response. You only have one stress response, and stress is stress. And your nervous system doesn't care if it's physical, emotional, psychological. It does not care. So that activation creates a cascade of physiological, biological responses. Your amygdala fires, which means your stress hormones surge, and then your body prepares to literally defend itself or withdraw or appease, right? That's a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And then that tightening in your chest, that rush of irritation, that need to do something about it, which often manifests as shit talking, right? Judging, blaming, projecting. None of that is random. It's actually your natural biology. Now, from a subconscious perspective, and this is so key to understand, activations are not about the present moment. They are echoes of your past, unhealed past to be specific, surfacing through present circumstances that are similar. So your subconscious mind is like a vast archive of every emotional imprint you've ever experienced. So when something in the present moment resembles an unresolved imprint, whether that's a belief, a memory, a fear, trauma, or a suppressed emotion, your subconscious seizes that opportunity to bring it forward because it wants it to be resolved. You have to remember at all times that your brain and your body want to heal. They do not like operating in chronic stress and dysregulation. That's not their preferred or natural state of being. So your unresolved shit is always going to surface because your brain and your body want to heal. So every time you get annoyed, your subconscious is essentially tapping you on the shoulder and saying, yo, this feeling is not new. This is very familiar. There is something here we did not fully resolve. We did not integrate for realsies last time. So can we try to do that now? Yeah? That's what's happening. If your subconscious is your friend, which is what I teach in my program actually, is to befriend your subconscious. And it's such a powerful healing practice. But that's basically what it's saying to you. And so that person who annoys you because they're so arrogant or they always take advantage of you, that person is actually mirroring an aspect of yourself that you have not resolved, that you have not integrated, whether that's a shadow aspect around confidence that you have disowned, or a childhood wound around being used or manipulated. That situation that frustrates you because it feels so unfair is actually, again, showing you where an old powerlessness story is still running in your subconscious and your nervous system and your body. And we're going to get into more of all of this later, but that is what is happening when you are annoyed and you get activated. Your nervous system and your subconscious are like, hey, this is an old stress that we have not resolved, and we're firing right now because there's still an emotional imprint here that you have not processed, that you have not released. And your nervous system is not like a clumsy, like overreactive machine naturally. Like when you get annoyed and activated, even if it's like a lot, it's not because you're broken. Your body is not broken. You have to understand, like, this is what your nervous system, this is how your subconscious like naturally function. So when you feel irritated, jealous, frustrated, defensive, or inexplicably like tense, just like, oh, I'm just on edge like all the time, those are not malfunctions in your brain or in your body. They are messages. Every single instance is inner guidance, like a literal compass from your nervous system, your body, subconscious going, pay attention. This is not resolved in you. Something within you needs love and care and release. So every emotional activation you experience is specific, very specific feedback pointing you toward where growth and healing and integration are needed. So you are being directed to where there is stagnant emotional energy and outdated patterns and unmet needs. And that's fantastic. That means like your nervous system, your subconscious, and your body are like always communicating to you. And I teach this in my program. It's like the body wisdom is always online. It's always intelligent, but it's like you have to learn how to trust that and listen to it and then take action in accordance to the guidance that your own or miraculous system is giving you. And so annoyances and activations are like those car indicator lights that come on the dashboard, when that check engine light comes on. When that light comes on, I bet you're probably not judging it or shit talking your dashboard or gossiping about that light. You probably recognize it as like, oh, my car is alerting me to something under the hood or something within this car's mechanics that needs my attention. And so annoyances and activations like literally work the same way. But the issue is most people are never taught to understand their emotions or themselves this way. We're conditioned to either ignore that light, to play it off as not a big deal, right? By smiling about it or laughing about it, making fun of ourselves, or people get pissed, they blame someone else for causing it. But don't get mad at the messenger. The messenger is just a messenger. That's what annoyances and activations are. And when you start to understand that your annoyances, your activations are not you being emotionally sensitive, it's not your brain being chaotic, but rather they are precise guidance, very intelligent wisdom, then your life is going to stop feeling random and chaotic or tumultuous or unfair, and it's going to start feeling intelligently orchestrated. You're going to start feeling very loved. And so being annoyed and activated is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It's really truly evidence that something deep within you is ready to evolve, to be liberated, to be healed. Your body, your subconscious, and your highest self are all collaborating in real time to guide you to greater freedom is what it is. And so this is why learning to understand and honor those activations is one of the most powerful healing skills that you can develop, because it turns everyday annoyances into profound opportunities for accelerated healing and productive growth. But most people resist that invitation to turn within, to look at themselves, to be vulnerable, or admit their own truths. Most people shove down their emotions, Most people distract themselves or they externalize that irritation onto something or someone else. But resisting the activation just keeps that tension stored and stagnated, which then just perpetuates more stress, more emotional reactivity, and reinforces whatever wounded or trauma narrative that hasn't been resolved and is surfacing. But when you meet the activation with presence, then you give your nervous system permission, essentially, to resolve that lingering tension, to release that stagnant emotion, and to reorganize around calm and coherence. Annoyance and frustration and defensiveness, those are all forms of dysregulation, really, signaling different ways that your nervous system reacts under stress. They are forms of trauma responses. And I did a whole episode about trauma responses that you should listen to if you haven't yet. But, some activations push you toward a fight response, which is that sharp irritation, that aggression. Some will push you toward a flight trauma response, and that's avoidance, withdrawal, distraction. Other activations and annoyances will push you toward a freeze trauma response, which is numbness, detachment, shutting down. And then others will push you toward a fawn trauma response, which is when you people please or you over accommodate to maintain some perceived sense of safety. But all of those trauma responses are your nervous system asking you to pay attention, to take care of yourself. And each one is an opportunity for really profound healing if you understand that you are responding from trauma, and then you meet that response consciously with self-love. Because only when you are conscious can you make conscious healing choices. And this is why presence is so vital for coherence, which is essential for holistic, lasting, and productive healing. When you stay present with the activation, meaning you observe it without automatic reactivity, then you actually engage your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that's responsible for self-regulation, for reflection, for executive function. And so then that engagement then signals to your body that the situation is safe enough that you can then respond with integrity and then integrate the experience. And your amygdala, again, the alarm center of your brain, then actually calms down, which means your stress hormones decrease, and then you can move from reactive survival mode into responsive parasympathetic healing and integration mode. Now, this isn't just theory, friend. This is neuroscience. And neuroscience shows that repeated practice of observing activations without reactive behavior strengthens neural pathways that support emotional resilience. And then over time, your baseline stress level lowers, your emotional flexibility increases, and your nervous system learns to approach difficult experiences with curiosity rather than fear, which is what aggression is rooted in, because all trauma responses can be understood as fear responses. And that's when you start rewiring not only your responses, but the emotional architecture of your brain, right? Forming new associations that prioritize calm and clarity and self-mastery. And then you let those outdated neural networks rooted in trauma and wounds and past pains, they will literally begin to wither and dissolve. And one of the most powerful practices to rewire neural pathways and facilitate productive healing is gratitude. Now, yeah, sure, gratitude is probably like the last thing you feel when someone annoys you. You probably follow that typical reactive pattern, which is to unconsciously react and project and complain. But all of that just reinforces the original wound and the stress-based neural pathways that you haven't begun to rewire. Like, for example, when someone says something that annoys you or activates you, without even realizing it, you build a whole narrative about why they're wrong and why you're justified. And then maybe you vent that to a friend and you complain about what happened. And you'll probably certainly replay that story, right? That narrative in your head where you're just like stewing in silent resentment and festering in that annoyance. And when you react that way, the emotional charge doesn't actually dissolve because the activation is not resolved at the root. It just embeds itself more deeply because you're just like rehearsing the very pattern you ultimately need to outgrow. Like that's why your brain and your subconscious have surfaced the activation. That's why you're emotionally charged. However, when you implement gratitude because you want to heal, and I know you want to heal, then when you consciously appreciate the activation instead of unconsciously reacting to it, you get to interrupt that automatic subconscious stress response. And that's when you are like literally available for curiosity rather than judgment. And that's when you can shift from defensiveness into observation and self-reflection. And ultimately, what happens when you thank the activation for revealing something hidden within you, you stop subscribing to victim consciousness and you become self-empowered and self-aware and sovereign again. Gratitude is a powerful practice here because gratitude rewires how your nervous system interprets that moment. Instead of perceiving the activation or annoyance as a threat, your brain begins to register it as valuable information, which means gratitude then engages your prefrontal cortex again, which then downregulates your stress response and then allows for higher order thinking to come online. So in other words, gratitude like biologically shifts you from survival mode into healing and integration mode. So higher order thinking needs to come online because healing always begins with awareness. You can't heal what you refuse to see. Most of the emotional patterns that run your life operate in the shadows, meaning they are unexamined, they're unconscious, and they're just automatic. And your annoyances and activations are clear and loud signs pointing you to those exact hidden places. So gratitude here isn't just some superficial woo-woo spiritual practice. It is like really warranted. You should be grateful for the times that you get activated and annoyed because every instance is like an exquisitely accurate diagnostic tool, like literally revealing the exact coordinates where unresolved emotional imprints remain buried in you. And so without those moments of annoyance, so much of your inner landscape would stay invisible, stay in your blind spot. And so if you don't become conscious and appreciative, then you just continue to run old scripts, repeat the same dynamics, the same patterns, reinforce the same wounded identities of being small, of being powerless, being unlovable, not enough, etc. And then you're just going to keep wondering why nothing in your life is changing. So every activation is actually like speeding up your growth by surfacing what wants and needs to be healed and evolved. So consciously practicing gratitude instead of allowing unconscious trauma responses to take the wheel is how you turn your life's irritations into healing allies. Instead of being pulled into endless loops of complaining and blaming, you step into conscious authorship of your own evolution. That means you're no longer waiting for external circumstances to change in order for you to feel better. You're then empowered to use every experience as a portal into deeper self-awareness and deeper healing. And that is what emotional maturity is. It's not bypassing discomfort, but meeting it with curiosity and openness and clarity and vulnerability with yourself. And all of that becomes a catalyst for your peace rather than an impediment. So now let's talk about the relational aspect of this because your activations are largely relational, meaning most of the time you get annoyed because someone else did something, meaning something external activated you. Now, many people don't realize how much of their unresolved internal patterns shape their interactions with other people. For most people, when someone annoys them, their first instinct is often, again, to vent, to gossip, to blame, right? You'll tell a friend, can you believe that they did that? And then you'll just replay the event in your mind over and over just to justify your annoyance, your irritation, your reaction. And those behaviors may feel productive, and I'm using that very loosely, because they may release like a certain level of surface tension, but in reality, they're actually avoidance strategies. They allow momentary discomfort to escape, again on a surface level, but you're not ever addressing the underlying wound or the root cause. And so every time you do that, you're just projecting because you're taking unresolved emotions and judgments and traumas and fears within yourself and unconsciously attributing them to someone else. That person who annoys you is very rarely the true source of your irritation. They're almost always a mirror reflecting an aspect of your internal landscape that you have not seen, acknowledged, loved, and healed. Everything in our reality is a mirror because our reality is just a reflection of us. So when something appears or happens that you don't like and then you react to it, you become annoyed, you become activated, what's actually happening is you're witnessing an aspect of yourself that you do not like, meaning an unintegrated aspect of yourself, a disowned aspect of yourself. Now, when you start owning your activations, you start appreciating them for the precise healing guidance that they are. And when you learn to pause and notice and explore them with loving curiosity, then you automatically reduce your projections because you stop blaming other people for your feelings. You stop blaming other people for your unresolved mental and emotional patterns and beliefs and wounds. And the less that you project your shit onto other people, the healthier all of your relationships become because they become more authentic, less codependent, more clear, less transactional. And then, of course, communication improves, empathy deepens, and then trust becomes far easier to establish because people sense that you're engaging from presence rather than from reaction or avoidance or emotional immaturity, which then naturally fosters greater connection instead of greater conflict. So instead of reacting or withdrawing every time you feel annoyed, please lean into it with curiosity. Ask yourself, what part of me is being mirrored right now? What is this situation showing me about my own emotional and internal patterns? Simply becoming curious about yourself instead of automatically projecting judgment and blame is going to very quickly and naturally dissolve unnecessary conflict before it begins. And it's going to help you feel immediately more peaceful and centered as your authentic self. And you're no longer going to feed needless tension by reacting defensively. And you're going to stop creating immature dramas that tend to dominate superficial social interactions. So when your reactive interactions become regulated, meaning you become regulated in your own reactivity and then become more responsive, then your relationships are going to become a reflection of inner stability rather than inner conflict. Because by taking personal responsibility for your emotional state rather than projecting it onto other people, your conversations are no longer going to feel like battlegrounds or like you're walking on eggshells, or disagreements are no longer going to spiral into resentment, and even difficult personalities or challenging dynamics are going to be met with grounded curiosity and greater ease. And from a neuroscience perspective, learning to stop projecting and to start regulating with self-inquiry and personal accountability, again, strengthens your prefrontal cortex, a part of your brain that governs regulation and perspective and empathy, which means that you continue to downregulate your fight or flight survival response. And that means that you get to spend more of your day living in coherence and ease rather than in survival mode where you're just tense and dissatisfied all the time. And we all know by now, we hear this over and over and over again because it's true, your outer world is really just a reflection of your inner world. And so the less reactive you are internally, the more harmonious your external relationships are going to become. So when you start treating activations as self-healing opportunities rather than just annoyances, and you stop perpetuating cycles of gossip and blame and projection, and you foster emotional maturity and authentic connections that are rooted in presence and awareness and compassion, the world around you becomes less about negotiating conflict and more about enjoying like self-trust and clarity and confidence and alignment. Simply because you are grounded in yourself, your nervous system is regulated, and you are coherent, showing up as your highest self and integrated in your wholeness because you are taking accountability for everything that is yours. And this takes me to shadow work, because annoyances and activations are fundamentally massive healing opportunities when you treat them that way, because you're going to learn that they are direct invitations to reclaim parts of yourself that you've disowned. So every time you feel irritated or defensive or frustrated, there is a part of you being reflected back or that's surfacing that has been repressed, suppressed, denied, shamed, or judged. Those are your unintegrated shadow aspects, the parts of yourself that you have been conditioned to believe are unacceptable. Like the impulses that you have been led to suppress because someone made you feel ashamed of them, the feelings that you have hidden to stay safe or to be accepted and loved. Most people ignore shadow work because, sure, it can be uncomfortable if you have not cultivated unconditional self-love and radical self-acceptance, but it is the most liberating healing work that we can do. Your shadow aspects don't vanish because you don't want to see them or reject them. And that's why when you have a lot of unintegrated shadow, you are easily activated because your reality is just mirroring all these aspects of yourself that you have denied, that you have avoided, that you have rejected. And it's so critical to understand that that's what you're witnessing, right? Oh, this annoyance, this activation is actually showing me a disowned aspect of myself, because you wouldn't be annoyed if that aspect of yourself was loved and healed and integrated. So all of those irritations and annoyances are just reflections of the parts of yourself that you haven't fully loved and accepted. And it's very crucial to understand that those parts of yourself need to be reintegrated because they are a part of your wholeness. And that's why people who have a lot of unintegrated shadows struggle to live or be loved as their whole authentic self, because they are not living in their wholeness. They are living in suppressed shame and fragmentation. But the moment that you lean into your activations as healing opportunities and guidance for self-love, the more that you can start reintegrating those rejected parts of yourself and reclaim your wholeness. For example, if someone's arrogance annoys you, ask yourself, when was my confidence judged or silenced in the past? And have I healed that experience or trauma? That curiosity is going to open the door to not only greater self-love, but shadow integration and thus more reclamation of your innate wholeness. Because only when you acknowledge those denied aspects of yourself can you appreciate them, can you love them, can you integrate them so that you no longer feel shame or judgment about them. That's what integration is. So when you reclaim those aspects of yourself consciously and accept them with love, that's when they stop showing up in your reality as annoyances, because you no longer judge or reject that aspect of yourself. So when you see that in another person, it's not going to activate you. So following that previous example, the next time that someone exemplifies arrogance, what will happen if you do the shadow work of healing and loving and accepting that aspect of yourself, you're not going to even notice it when someone else behaves in an arrogant way. And that's when you know you have integrated that aspect of yourself. Every single person has all human traits, dormant or active. It doesn't matter. No human is exempt from the full scope of humanity. That's why investing in shadow work not only fosters unconditional self-love, but it fosters true compassion. And when you have reclaimed sovereignty over your own internal landscape by learning to love all parts of yourself, all aspects of your humanity, that's when your external landscape is going to reflect that inner self-love, acceptance, and peace. And also, shadow work and inner child work go hand in hand. And this is another reason why embracing annoyances and activations with gratitude is so healing. Most of the roots of the activations that we experience are rooted in childhood. They stem from unmet needs, moments when our authenticity wasn't loved, and then we felt unsafe being our authentic self, or times when we were criticized, neglected, silenced, shamed, or dismissed, unloved. And so that tightness in your chest, that sudden frustration, that surge of irritation, those are the imprints of your inner child saying, this feeling is familiar. I need to feel love right now. I need to feel safe right now. I don't want to carry this anymore. So meeting those activations with presence and self-love is actually powerful and essential inner child healing work, because it allows those old trauma loops to complete and those stagnated emotions to release. It allows your inner child to be seen, to be validated, and ultimately to feel safe in the present moment, because you're choosing to love yourself instead of projecting and blaming. You're essentially giving the care, understanding, and validation to yourself that you did not receive in the past. And that's why moments of irritation can feel so charged. Again, they're not about the person or the event that's happening in the present. They're about old, unfinished business, essentially. That's just surfacing for resolution. And again, from a neuroscience perspective, if you consciously engage with your inner child when you get annoyed, when you get activated, by becoming grateful, by becoming curious about the root within yourself, and then you consciously love the parts of yourself that surface, you activate neural pathways that integrate emotional memory with conscious awareness. And that helps unresolved trauma and unprocessed feelings to release and resolve safely. And so when you continue to engage with your annoyances and your activations in that healing way, meaning with love, with curiosity, with reclamation of yourself, your wholeness, like you stop outsourcing your sense of safety, your sense of validation and worth to someone else. And that is when healing really accelerates. Because when you combine shadow integration with inner child healing, every activation becomes a chance to reclaim yourself, to stop rejecting those disowned and denied aspects of yourself, a chance to soothe your unmet needs, a chance to liberate that trapped emotional energy. And then you move from being unconsciously reactive to being consciously present and coherent with yourself in a loving and healing way. And that is when your nervous system relaxes. And when your nervous system relaxes, that is when your natural self-healing capabilities kick into gear and naturally optimize. So the things that annoy you aren't just going to teach you about yourself, but they will literally also heal and free you if you let them. And now I want to zoom out to the spiritual perspective because, it's so critical to do that and talk about your highest self, because your highest self uses those moments of activations like mirrors, yes, but also initiations to help you see the exact places where you are still subscribing or operating with distortion, where you have not resolved your fears, where you are still operating from outdated conditioning that doesn't align with who and what you truly are. And those are not random initiations. They're always perfectly timed for exactly where you are and exactly where you want to be. And if you lean into every annoyance and every activation as healing guidance and healing support, then you're just going to reclaim more and more of your highest truth. You're going to become more powerful. Because your highest self knows that those activations and those annoyances are also architects of your reality. Because every time you get activated and emotionally charged, you are presented with a choice point. Like, will you repeat the same old reactive patterns, or will you shift into coherence, show up as your highest self with conscious presence? You have that choice every single moment of every day. And going back to neuroscience, every time you make a different, empowered, healing, and coherent choice, you physically reshape your brain by creating and strengthening new neural pathways. But when you continue to respond with blame or projection, then those old neural pathways that reinforce reactivity, that reinforce powerlessness, strengthen. So again, when you respond with curiosity, with gratitude, with compassion, with self-love, you rewire your inner reality, which then, of course, rewires your outer reality. And that is the initiation that your highest self is presenting to you, to reclaim that power, to literally dissolve the habitual loops that once dictated your emotional responses, so that you can create new pathways that support clarity and resilience and emotional freedom, so that you can live as your highest self as the norm. And again, from a spiritual perspective, this is so much more than self-regulation, because every moment of conscious integration and resolution, when you make that different choice to become responsive and self-loving as opposed to projecting and blaming, you alter your energetic resonance of your field, and then thus your level of coherence, which determines the timeline that you're living in, i.e. your reality. So each conscious choice that you make in the present moment really does influence not only how you experience your reality, but how your reality unfolds. But also because you're creating new neural pathways, your emotional patterns in the future are also going to evolve, because you're living in the power of your highest self to be your highest self. So by accepting the initiation and choosing to be present and choosing to be curious and grateful, rather than being simply annoyed and reactive, you are literally aligning with the timeline of your greatest sovereignty and emotional coherence. That's the initiation of your highest self. And it's not a test. We're never tested. We're not under scrutiny ever. But your highest self knows that you're going to be happier, more liberated, more empowered when you heal yourself and love yourself. And so, of course, there is a spiritual aspect of this, because all of those annoyances and activations, when you react with blame and judgment and projection, that's all your wounded lower self. That's not who and what you truly are. And so when you begin to respond differently to being annoyed and being activated, that's going to cause a ripple effect. Because when you stop outsourcing your emotional responsibility by blaming others, blaming the situation, judging, venting for temporary relief, and you start to learn to master yourself, master your inner environment, master inner stability and peace, of course that's going to radiate outward, meaning your relationships are not only going to change, but the way that people perceive you, even strangers, is going to change, because your entire field is going to start to harmonize and stabilize in greater coherence. And that is noticeable, not just in you, but in the world around you. People are going to treat you differently because you are treating yourself differently. And then you become an inspiration for others in your community. Collective healing doesn't occur because everyone suddenly becomes perfect, or because the world just collectively shifts timelines. It happens when individuals learn to heal themselves. And that can only happen when each of us learns to meet our activations consciously and compassionately. So personal activations and annoyances don't continue to be fodder for more antagonistic ways of being, more conflict, more distortion, but lessons in self-love, lessons in self-mastery. We don't become a better world through shit-talking about the people who don't thank us when we open the door for them at our favorite lunch spot. We become a better world when each of us understands that our reality reflects who we are, including our unhealed wounds. And when our wounds get reflected, it is our responsibility to recognize them instead of project them onto other people. It is our responsibility to heal ourselves. And so the more you cultivate emotional freedom, which is what that is, and then integrate that, the more your interactions and relationships and experiences will then align with your highest self and highest timeline. And that is how true liberation occurs, not by avoiding difficulty, not by silencing your discomfort, but by leaning into every activation as a guide, as a teacher, as a portal to deeper peace and greater freedom. The things and people that annoy you are not your enemies. They're just mirrors reflecting the parts of yourself that are waiting to be loved and healed and integrated. Every activation is a sacred signpost, a precise guidance system, an invitation from your nervous system, from your subconscious, from your highest self, to step into deeper self-awareness and sovereignty and resolution and freedom. So when you meet those moments with curiosity and presence and, yes, gratitude, when you stop projecting blame, when you stop reinforcing your old wounds and you reclaim your sovereignty, you're not only doing yourself a solid, but you're doing your community a service by healing yourself and contributing less distortion into the world. And this is the essence of radical, unconditional love, really. It's choosing to show up fully for yourself, even in the moments that feel uncomfortable, and giving your inner child and your shadow the attention and compassion and acknowledgement and respect that they have been seeking and that they deserve. Self-love is never about avoiding your activations to stay high vibe or only feeling good when life is easy. It's about embracing the full spectrum of your experience and trusting that every activation, every annoyance is a literal opportunity to expand, to heal yourself, to love yourself, to liberate yourself from old patterns and identities that are not self-loving, that are not self-serving, and that are not in alignment with your highest self. So the next time something or someone annoys you, please remember that your inner wisdom is actually surfacing and speaking to you. So instead of resisting that wisdom and guidance by complaining or venting, I hope you turn within. I hope you get curious about yourself, about how you can love yourself more so that you can heal yourself more, so that you can free yourself more. I hope you thank that activation. I hope that you become available to it so that you can appreciate the parts of yourself that are surfacing for you to see yourself. And then I hope that you invest in healing whatever needs to be healed, because knowing is not the same thing as healing. And I say this in my book, but true unconditional self-love is not passive. It's active love, it's loyal love, and it is radically present. So here's your action step for the week. The next time you get annoyed or irritated or activated, I want you to practice presence, self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-love. And so that's going to start by you witnessing the activation. So you want to pause for a moment and you want to label the emotion that you're feeling in the moment. And like literally say to yourself, I am feeling anger, I'm feeling irritation, I'm feeling frustration, or whatever it is that you're feeling. I'm feeling resentful. And then say, this emotion is valid, and I will love this emotion by becoming curious about the message that it has for me. And then I want you to scan your body, tune in to where that emotion, where that feeling, where that sensation is in your body, where you're tense, where you're gripping, bracing, clenching, where that activation lives in you physically. Is your chest tight? Is your jaw tight? Are your shoulders tense? Does your stomach feel heavy? Like, where is your nervous system guiding you to where that unresolved tension and emotion is being held? And then when you identify those places in your body, I want you to tap them lovingly, not aggressively, with love. Just tap that area in the body and breathe deeply to encourage that tension to dissolve. Just breathe into those tight areas and tap. And then I want you to ask yourself, what part of me is showing up at this moment that needs attention and needs love? What part of me was similarly upset before when my needs were not met? And the answers to those questions is going to direct you inward rather than outward. And then take a few deep cleansing breaths from your belly. And I want you to express gratitude, even if it feels like weird and counterintuitive. I want you to literally thank the activation, which means thanking the emotion, thanking your body, thanking your brain. So I want you to say, thank you, mind, body, soul system, for showing me what I still need to love, to heal, and to integrate. And doing that is important because gratitude is going to shift your nervous system from defensive mode, survival mode, into relaxation mode. And that is the only way that you can operate in coherence and heal productively. And then finally, just commit to taking a small healing action to honor that message of that activation. So that could be journaling about what surfaced, that could be connecting with your inner child by giving them validation, giving them love, seeing them, embracing them, honoring that rejected aspect of yourself. It could be allowing yourself to just simply feel and release the emotion through intentional movement or breath work or a somatic practice. And when you habituate that in response to annoyances and activations, you're going to recondition yourself to love and heal yourself as opposed to outsourcing your emotional life and inner reality onto other people and other circumstances, essentially giving your power away. And when you behave with that level of self-empowerment and self-awareness, you're going to experience how you become less and less activated and annoyed over time because you're going to be healing yourself. You know, I see so many people hung up on blaming other people, on judging others, on criticizing and shit-talking and gossiping. And these are the same people who have not evolved as individuals, who are still emotionally the same people they were 10 years ago. These are the people who think that disliking others is somehow loving themselves. And all of that backfires because these are the same people who are overtly or secretly unhappy with their lives and with themselves. But what these people don't understand is that the more we stop pointing fingers and blaming others and projecting our shit, the less annoying the world becomes, the less irritated we become, the less aggravating other people become. Because by choosing to heal and love ourselves instead of judging and condemning other people, we foster freedom and inner peace. And when that becomes our norm, the outer world equally harmonizes and becomes more peaceful. So if your reality is a constant barrage of annoying people and situations, the issue is not out there, friend. And this is not about blaming you, blaming ourselves. No. Blame is irrelevant. This is about whether or not you are accountable for your own well-being, for your emotions, and for the person you choose to show up as, for yourself and for the world. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope this episode awakened you, inspired you, and reminded you of what's possible when you love, heal, and free yourself and reclaim your highest truth and power. If this show has transformed or enlightened your self-love, growth, and healing journey, please like, save, and share this episode and leave a positive review on Apple or Spotify. And subscribe to be reminded of new episodes. Your support is deeply appreciated and truly helps this show so much. And if today's episode resonated with you, don't stop here. Go deeper. My book, Unconditional, You Are Perfect As You Are, expands on these teachings and gives you the missing framework about self-love that no one is talking about. So get your copy today to start reading and loving yourself more. And if you're ready for the ultimate healing journey with daily instruction and guidance from me, I'd love to see you inside the Source membership, the only holistic and comprehensive step-by-step self-healing program that is proven to work. Remember, you were never meant to struggle or wait for what is already yours. It's time to claim everything you want and more. All the links are in the show notes. I'll see you next time.